Welcome everybody to my talk called Getting Blindly Lucky, where I'll share some interesting blind XSS stories. So first of all, I'm just like everybody to be here. Everybody that's here today, we're having a rough 2020, so hopefully this day will be pretty cool for you with all of these awesome talks. So who am I? My name is Jasmin Landry. I'm French Canadian, so we pronounce my name Jasmin Landry. I'm known as JRock17 in the bug bounty world. So you can find me on Twitter, GitHub, Slack, Discord, Bookrowd, HackerOne, Detectify. Pretty much everywhere that's hacking related, my name is JRock17. I am a part-time bug bounty hunter. So what I mean by part-time is that I actually have a part-time job where I work a handful of hours per day or per month. A couple of days per month. So that my income is pretty much almost 50-50 with my job. So for me, bug bounty is still important. The agenda for today, we're just gonna go do a brief overview of what is XSS and how they work. Then we follow it up with by looking at the two client-side frameworks. The first one being AngularJS and the second one being Vue.js. There are multiple more client-side frameworks that we can use in applications, but these are the ones where I've had the most fun with XSS bugs. And then following up, we're going to look at my interesting blind XSS stories, and we can finish it up if you have any questions or comments, and then we go from there. So what is an XSS? As we all know, XSS stands for cross-site scripting, and user attacks are a type of injection in which malicious scripts are injected into trusted websites. Examples of malicious scripts, we all know there's JavaScript, but there's also Flash and the VB-script. VB-script is a bit more rare, but it is still possible, and it works pretty much only on the best website in the world, Internet Explorer. Obviously, that's a joke. Yeah, I think I've only done that once a couple of years ago at work, and it was just funny having an XSS bug by executing VB-script. And there are mainly three types of XSS attacks. The first one, the most popular one, reflected XSS. So that's when you actually have your payload in the URL itself, and then by sending the request, your payload is reflected in the response. And then we also have DOM XSS, which now we also have newer techniques like post-message API. So this is when the JavaScript code is vulnerable. This is a vulnerable piece of code, and you would it's similar to a reflected XSS, whereas you would send a URL to the browser, and in the response, your payload would trigger. And there's also a stored XSS. This is when the payload is actually stored in the application. So that means it'll always be there until it's deleted, obviously. And yeah, and with stored XSS, if the payload is stored in a location you don't know of, we would consider this blind XSS. And the typical POC for an XSS attack would be to steal CSRF tokens in order to do CSRF attacks. We could steal cookies if they're not HTTP only. With that, we can take over the victim's account. We can also steal local storage and session storage tokens. Oftentimes, in applications, the companies store tokens like a JWT or just like sensitive information that shouldn't be there, and it's always interesting to look at those places when you find an XSS bug. It can also be used in coarse misconfigs with an XHR or with the Fetch API to steal the sensitive data like PII. And more commonly these days, we often find XSS bugs in HTML to PDF converters. If you want to know more about this, NAMSEC has a great presentation on this. I strongly suggest to look at it. So let's look at AngularJS. AngularJS is a model view controller client-side framework built by Google. I'm not going to go too much into the details of how it works, but it is like a template engine where your client-side code has like templates, and this is actually how you would execute an XSS attack. It won't necessarily work with like a script tag where you would do your alert. You have to inject your JavaScript code in a template. For example, here as an example of a POC to test for looking for XSS bugs with AngularJS, you would do two curly brackets. Then you would put something like 7 times 7, and then close your curly brackets. Here I actually have a typo. I only have one, but it's supposed to be 2. And then if in the response it returns 49, that means you have a potential XSS bug. So we're just going to do a quick demo. Oops. One sec. Where is my Chrome? So here, this is just like to show how it works. It's not exactly the same thing because this is obviously just client-side code. There's no server at all. So here let's say we assume that the injection point is right here. So if I run this code, obviously it'll say injection here. And then if I replace the injection here with curly brackets, 7 times 7, and then run it, it'll obviously return 49. And we could put like our alert right here directly, except that for some cases it won't work because the alert method is not always available. So what we have to do is actually create a constructor like this. This is the equivalent of the function constructor in JavaScript. And then from here we open up parenthesis, and then we put in our let's say our POC, which in this case I can just put an alert. I'll just alert the main, and then here I will actually call the function that I just created, and then run it, and there is our pop-up. So that's how you would execute an XSS attack on AngularJS. If we look at Vue.js now, they describe themselves as a progressive model view model client-side framework for building user interfaces and single-page applications. This is exactly the same thing as AngularJS. It takes in templates in order to execute JavaScript. So again, we won't necessarily see attacks using script tags or image tags or the regular HTML type of XSS attacks. So again, just going to do a quick demo on Vue.js XSS attack. So if you just compare the code that it was before with AngularJS, here I actually do need to have some JS code. So what it does, it just creates a new Vue template, and with the app name here, so we can see here the ID is app, and again injection point. We just assume that this would be here. Obviously, that's not the case because I mean this is just some client-side code. There's no server involved. So if I again replace injection point with curly braces, and then opening it up, putting in 7 times 7, and then running it, it'll be 49, just like it was before. And obviously 7 times 7 is valid JavaScript. If we open the console and run 7 times 7, it'll return 49. So again, it's actually the same thing as AngularJS. The alert method isn't available, and other few methods as well aren't available directly. So we have to use the constructor function. And again, I can just do an alert here. Then I call that function. And there you go. So again, that's how Vue.js applications are vulnerable to XSS attacks. And if you compare both of these frameworks on the market, a couple of years ago, AngularJS was a bit more popular, but now it's really Vue.js. It's a lot more popular than AngularJS from what we can see. This was gathered by Webalizer. So Webalizer is a tool where we can view what websites they have, what kind of technologies a typical website uses, and from what we can see in their data, there's a lot more traffic and a lot more sites that use Vue.js. So now the interesting part: what is a blind XSS? Like I mentioned earlier, it is like a variant of a stored XSS. The payload is saved and executed in a separate part of the application, for example, an admin panel, or in a completely different application, or like an internal application. There are multiple tools that help in finding them. There's XSSHunter, which is what I used, and there's also a Sleepy Puppy, which was built by Netflix, and there's Burp Collaborator, that we can use as well. There are probably more tools, but these are the ones that I know of, and the ones that I have personally tested on my time. And from these three, to me, XSSHunter is the best one. So this tool, it gives a handful of payloads that we can use by default. So they create like a script that you can use on a specific domain. So when you create an account, it asks to create a domain, and you can give it like anything. The domain is xss.ht, so your subdomain will be what you want. So for me, obviously, I just put something as simple as my hacker name, jrock17. So if we look at the payloads, they give one for the script tag, the JavaScript URI, input tag, image tag, and so on and so forth. But what we can see is there's actually no payload for AngularJS and Vue.js applications. So I found that a bit funny because there's still a lot of attack surface on these applications. And I looked up HackerOne's activity on Google for blind XSS, and all of them either use something like a script tag or image tag to inject their remote URL from XSSHunter. There wasn't a single one where there was like a template injection, which again was a bit odd because I feel like it's something that we should all test, but not a lot of people look for. So this is the typical payload that I use for blind XSS bugs while looking in AngularJS and Vue.js applications. So the same thing as we mentioned earlier, we can use the constructor function. Then we can use the JavaScript method import, which imports our remote script. And then we just call that function. So here's an example of a bug that I had found on HackerOne a while ago. It was a blind XSS bug by using this payload inside of a CSV file. So I put that payload in a cell in my CSV file, and I uploaded it, and then it was parsed on the admin side, and then from the parsing, I created like some kind of report that was visible on the website. And when an admin looked at the report, it triggered because Vue.js didn't properly look at the data inside of the CSV file. So I feel like it's something that should work often because AngularJS and Vue.js is pretty common nowadays. So if you're ever testing these type of applications, make sure to test with this payload, because I feel like everybody's putting their default script tag and image tags, but this in normal cases won't work in AngularJS and Vue.js. So yeah, I suggest using this kind of payload while testing for in these applications. So now the interesting part, blind XSS stories. So the first one, I got a blind XSS on an employee's Mac OS on the Quick Look CSV plugin. I'll explain later what that is. And yeah, I got that $75 for that one. And the second one is just a regular blind XSS bug, except that it was like it was pretty funny how it happened. Well, I found it funny because we're just like, what the hell? How did this happen? Anyway, so you guys will see. And for that one, I got a nice bounty as well, $5,000. So the first blind XSS story. So I got a notification from XSSHunter, and while looking at the details, it wasn't the normal URL that we would see. For example, it wasn't like an HTTPS URL, and it was just something like this. We can see it was xapple QL ID. I was like, what the hell is this? I had never seen this before. So I actually Googled it, and it turns out that it was Apple's Quick Look feature. So the Quick Look feature is a way that we can preview a file without opening it. This is just a good way to just see what the file looks like, and yeah, exactly. And yeah, and while looking at the DOM of this website, or the URL, I could see that it was Quick Look CSV. It was created by Pascal Pfeiffer. Not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. And if you look at the date, it's pretty old. So I guess it makes sense that it's vulnerable. And then if I actually found the tool on GitHub, so as you can see, it's a plugin in Quick Look to preview CSV files. And as we can see, this is the screenshot from just a couple days ago. So there are still about 443 downloads per month. This is on macOS specifically, and it's still. I mean, it's not a lot of downloads, but it's still a couple of downloads, and it is actually still vulnerable. I contacted the developer, didn't have a response, and this is like over a year ago. So I figured I'd just to forget about it, and yeah. So yeah, I submitted the bug, and I got a nice message from the triager. I'm not the triager, the employee side, and he himself got a message from the CTO saying like, make sure you reward this guy. So to give you more details on what happened, I submitted I put in my payload as I would normally do. Then a couple months later, I got the notification from XSSHunter, and it actually took me 2 days to figure out who it belonged to what program it belonged to, just because I had no clue. I had no clue to what company it belonged to, because obviously the URL wasn't indicated of anything, and the CSV file, it had data. I mean, it had a ton of data, a ton of PII, but I didn't really know to what company it belonged to. So after 2 days of investigating, I actually figured it out, and then I submitted my report, and it worked. So they told me like exactly what happened on their side. So obviously, as we can imagine, if it triggered on Quick Look CSV, that means that from the application itself, they generated a report of some sort in CSV format, which obviously included my payload, my XSSHunter payload. And then from there, an employee used Quick Look CSV. I mean, just the Quick Look feature of his MacBook, and then it triggered the XSS. So I was able to execute JavaScript on the employee's MacBook. From what I was able to do was a bit limited, because of course we can't really. I couldn't really get a shell on the employee's laptop. I mean, it would have been really awesome, but from my knowledge with JavaScript and XSS, I don't think it would have been possible to execute JavaScript for more than what I did. But since XSSHunter actually takes screenshots, I was able to easily get a nice idea of what the CSV file contained. And yeah, like I said, there was a ton of PII, from credit card information to personal information, anything related to the customer's accounts. It was pretty fun. And so I asked them, like, why did you pay this much for a blind SSS? Because actually this this bounty was more than double the amount from their maximum critical bug on their bounty table. So I can't really explain exactly why for everything, but there was a bonus for getting access to customer data, and they also said like that I managed to get a dump of several active accounts and more stuff that I can't mention. So yeah, so it was pretty cool and like really surprising, because how many of us have got XSS bugs on a laptop? It's I'm sure there's not much. And then the second story. Again, this is a bit similar to the previous one, where I got a notification from XSSHunter. This time it was like a weird about source doc. I was like, what? That's weird. Like, why would it be this? And then execute origin, obviously it's no. So again, I look at the DOM and I was like, what? This can't be real. And this is what I see as the screenshot. So obviously it looks like an email, right? And if you actually read one sentence in the email that says, "You and your friends ruined a fine experiment. You should be ashamed of yourself." And then my payload, and then you didn't comply with instructions, poor quality. So this is actually a legit user that created a complaint from my account, because I can't really go into details exactly what tool or what application this was, but when you created a complaint, you could select the user which had the you could select the user which you wanted to make a complaint on, and obviously they selected my account, which my name was my XSS payload. So then he sent the complaint on my behalf because he didn't like my XSS payload, and then the complaint was forwarded as an email to the company, and in the company's internal email system, that's where the XSS triggered. So without my XSS payload annoying that person, I would have never found this bug, and it really took a legit user to make a complaint on my account to find that bug. So I just found that really funny, and I got really lucky on that one. And also the triagers from the application side, from the company side, found this pretty cool as well. They found it pretty funny. And yeah, that's it for my talk. Not sure if we can have any questions right now. But if not, you can just reach me out on Twitter. I'm known as, again, JRock17. And you can also reach me on LinkedIn. Oh yeah, and I forgot to ask you, you guys, I wanted to ask you a question. What kind of bug, what XSS bug do you think you guys have found the more? Reflected, stored, or DOM? You can put in the comments what you think the answer is, and we'll select a few winners with your comments. So again, thank you for listening.